On March 12, 1981, at precisely 8:47 p.m., Richard Coleman walked into the J. Edgar Hoover Building in Washington, D.C., carrying a briefcase that would alter the course of his entire family's life. He was 44 years old, a man whose days had until now been measured by routines, schedules, and the quiet rhythms of suburban life. Inside the briefcase, however, lay the seeds of devastation. Photographs of classified documents, coded letters written in Russian, and a list of names in his wife's handwriting filled its compartments. Richard had no way of knowing at the time that by the time he left that building 3 hours later, his wife would be under federal investigation for espionage, and his 3 children would begin a journey of confusion, deception, and emotional upheaval that would last for years. The Colemans lived in Arlington, Virginia, just 20 minutes from downtown Washington. Their house was a 2-story colonial, nestled in a neighborhood where families knew each other's names. Children played until the streetlights came on, and life appeared orderly and safe. Richard worked as a mid-level analyst at the Department of Commerce, a position he had held since 1973. Margaret, his wife, worked part-time in the same department as an administrative assistant in the Office of Trade Policy, a role she had scaled back from full-time after their first child, Jennifer, was born in 1968. On her non-work days, she taught piano from their home, arranging lessons in the afternoon while their 3 children, Jennifer, Michael, and Sarah, attended school. Neighbors who would later be interviewed described the Colemans as ordinary, dutiful, and hardworking, a family navigating the routines of suburban life in the early Reagan era. On January 28, 1981, that carefully constructed normality began to crumble. Richard came home early from work around 2:30 in the afternoon, feeling the onset of what he assumed was a simple flu. Margaret was upstairs, but she descended the stairs quickly, almost too quickly, with a flushed face and an unusual nervousness. At the time, Richard did not suspect anything. He lay down in the guest room, intending to rest, and the incident might have been forgotten entirely if not for what he discovered the next morning. In their bedroom closet, near the back wall, a floorboard protruded slightly more than usual. Richard had noticed it for months, but never acted on it. On the morning of January 29th, curiosity and an instinctive sense of unease led him to pry the board up. Beneath it lay a small metal box, approximately 8 inches by 6 inches. Inside were items that would unravel the life he thought he knew. 23 photographs of what appeared to be official documents, taken in dim light with a 35mm camera. Some familiar from Richard's own work at the Department of Commerce. Others originating from offices Margaret had access to through her administrative role. 4 letters written in coded Russian contained instructions regarding dead drops and communication protocols, while receipts from a Georgetown photo development shop confirmed the careful documentation of espionage activity spanning months. A notebook, 3 by 5 inches, contained columns of numbers and abbreviations that would later be identified as a basic substitution code. Richard did not confront Margaret. Instead, he embarked on a 6-week period of meticulous observation and documentation. His approach was methodical and precise, born of a clear understanding that he needed irrefutable evidence before taking the devastating step of reporting his wife to the authorities. Richard began by photographing every item in the metal box, using the Canon AE1 camera, normally reserved for family memories. He took 2 full rolls of film to ensure that every detail was recorded. He developed the photographs at a separate photo shop in Silver Spring, paying cash under a false name. The prints were then stored securely in his office at the Commerce Department, in a locked drawer where Margaret could not access them. He began checking the box regularly, noting changes without alerting Margaret. On February 7th, 3 new photographs appeared, documents related to grain export policies to Eastern Europe. On February 19th, the notebook contained additional coded entries. By March 2nd, letters had been replaced, handwriting subtly altered. Each observation was logged meticulously in a small notebook kept in his car, detailing times, dates, and actions. Richard's surveillance expanded to Margaret's routines. He observed her checking the mailbox before he arrived home, making phone calls that ended abruptly when he entered a room, and leaving for errands on Tuesday and Thursday evenings. On February 2nd, he followed her to Petioak Park, where she sat on the same bench for exactly 20 minutes before proceeding to a 7-Eleven to purchase groceries, establishing a seemingly innocuous alibi. By February 26th, Richard had positioned himself in the park 2 hours before her usual time, binoculars in hand, pretending to observe birds. A man approached the bench, left a folded newspaper, and departed. Margaret arrived later, sitting on the bench as usual, and Richard realized he had witnessed a classic dead drop operation, one of the intelligence procedures he had been briefed on during his security clearance training. As the weeks passed, Richard noticed subtle but significant signs of deception in Margaret's home routines. She often stayed up late, claiming to finish books or prepare piano lessons, but Richard learned to recognize the sound of basement doors opening and closing, the slight rustling of objects out of place. One night, he discovered a canvas bag containing a second set of identification documents under a different name, a road map marked with multiple locations, cash in $20 and $10 bills, and a small pocket calendar aligning with her Tuesday and Thursday excursions. The discoveries were overwhelming, but what weighed most heavily on Richard was the moral and emotional dilemma. Reporting Margaret meant she would be arrested and charged with espionage. Her children would be exposed to public scrutiny, and their lives would be irrevocably altered. Yet failing to report her would make him complicit, an accessory to her crimes, allowing classified information to continue reaching foreign powers. Richard resolved to do both, to report Margaret to the FBI while constructing a story that would shield his children from the truth. By early March of 1981, Richard Coleman had amassed what he believed was irrefutable evidence of his wife's espionage. Photographs, coded letters, surveillance logs, and the second set of identification documents painted a picture of deliberate deception and long-term betrayal. Every new discovery compounded the complexity of his situation. Richard was no longer simply a husband who had stumbled upon a secret. He had become the guardian of a truth that threatened to shatter his family. The moral and emotional stakes pressed upon him with relentless intensity. The children, Jennifer, Michael, and Sarah, were unaware of the double life their mother had been leading for years. Jennifer was 13, Michael 11, and Sarah 8. Their innocent routines continued uninterrupted by the extraordinary circumstances swirling around them. Richard's focus shifted from uncovering the espionage itself to protecting his children from its consequences. He spent hours sitting in the dark of his living room, considering every possible outcome, questioning how best to shield them from trauma while fulfilling what he perceived as his duty to his country. Richard knew the lie he was about to tell could not be half-hearted. It had to be complete, convincing, and sustainable for an indefinite period. He researched cancer treatment protocols at the local library, learning enough medical terminology to make his story plausible. He identified a fictitious treatment facility located far enough away to prevent frequent visits, but close enough that it would not strain credibility. He prepared detailed explanations for his children, anticipating questions about the prognosis, side effects, and duration of their mother's absence. Every detail had to align perfectly. Richard framed photographs of Margaret around the house and spoke of her in the present tense, reinforcing the illusion that she was alive and undergoing treatment. He spoke with teachers and neighbors, weaving a narrative that would justify any behavioral or emotional changes in the children. The precision and thoroughness of his preparations reflected not only his intelligence, but the depth of his fear that one misstep could expose the truth prematurely. March 11th arrived, and Richard knew the following day he would have to act. He had spent weeks wrestling with sleepless nights, ethical calculations, and the impossible responsibility of making life-altering decisions for his children. Reporting Margaret meant arrest and incarceration, public scrutiny, and a shattering of the familiar family structure. Yet, it was necessary to prevent further breaches of national security. Richard's resolve solidified. He would report his wife while maintaining the fabricated narrative for the sake of the children. On March 12, 1981, Richard entered the J. Edgar Hoover building, carrying the briefcase that had been the catalyst for months of clandestine investigation. He arrived at 8:47 p.m., waited 47 minutes at the front desk, and then began laying out the meticulously documented evidence for Special Agent David Thornton, the lead investigator. For 3 hours, Richard remained calm, methodical, and insistent. He emphasized 2 points above all others. His wife needed to be arrested immediately, and his children could not know the true nature of her crimes. The evidence was comprehensive. Internal Commerce Department documents, coded letters, photographs of classified materials, surveillance logs, and a detailed chronology of Margaret's activities provided the FBI with everything needed to identify her as the source of intelligence leaks dating back to at least 1977. The Bureau had been tracking unexplained reports reaching Soviet intelligence, but until Richard's intervention, the precise source had remained unidentified. On March 14, 1981, at 6:47 a.m., federal agents executed a sealed arrest warrant. Margaret was taken into custody quietly while preparing coffee in the kitchen. She did not resist or request legal counsel. Instead, she looked at Richard and simply said, "You found it." The children were still asleep upstairs, unaware that their world had been forever altered. Richard gathered Jennifer, Michael, and Sarah in the living room later that afternoon. He told them their mother was seriously ill, using the word cancer and describing a specialized treatment facility in another state. The explanation was thorough, incorporating pamphlets and medical terminology to make the narrative convincing. The children accepted his story because it came from a father who had never misled them before. 2 days later, Margaret was allowed a supervised visit at a federal facility in Northern Virginia. The children were led to believe they were visiting a hospital. The visit lasted 30 minutes, during which Margaret expressed love and encouragement, urging them to support their father and remain strong. It was the last time the children would see her for 14 years. Margaret Coleman's guilty plea began on August 3, 1981. Due to the sensitive nature of the evidence, the proceedings were largely classified. She admitted to conspiracy to commit espionage, unauthorized possession and transmission of national defense information, and acting as an agent of a foreign government without notifying the Attorney General. Court documents revealed that she had been recruited in 1974 by a Soviet intelligence officer operating under diplomatic cover. Initial requests were innocuous, but gradually became more compromising, culminating in repeated theft and transmission of classified materials. Margaret's testimony indicated she was never directly paid in cash, but small benefits, such as subsidized piano lessons and unexplained car repairs, were provided. When asked why she participated, she claimed she initially believed she was contributing to international peace and understanding. Later, once she understood she was being used for espionage, she was coerced with threats to her family, perpetuating her complicity for years. She was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison and transferred within a week. Back in Arlington, Richard executed the second phase of his plan, maintaining the illusion that Margaret was alive and receiving treatment. He communicated with neighbors, teachers, and the children's friends, consistently reinforcing the narrative. He preserved Margaret's piano in the living room, framed photographs, and spoke of her in present tense, sustaining the carefully constructed lie. The children adapted as best they could, immersing themselves in schoolwork and hobbies, unaware of the deception that would define their formative years. Jennifer excelled academically. Michael developed an obsession with understanding mechanics and electronics, and Sarah became quieter and more introspective. Letters from Margaret arrived periodically in plain envelopes, containing updates and reflections that Richard stored carefully in a locked drawer. Months became years, and the lie continued, unbroken. Years passed, and the fabricated story Richard had constructed for his children remained intact. Yet the passage of time created unavoidable inconsistencies. By 1987, Jennifer Coleman, now a freshman at the University of Virginia, began to notice that something did not add up. Her mother had supposedly been diagnosed with cancer in early 1981. 6 years had passed, yet the narrative of ongoing treatment persisted with no signs of recovery or completion. The timeline strained credulity. Jennifer had chosen biology as her field of study, partly driven by an intellectual curiosity about her mother's supposed illness. She began analyzing what she had been told, comparing the details with her coursework and knowledge of medical science. It became clear that the story Richard had told her made little sense. The inconsistencies gnawed at her, generating questions she could no longer ignore. She called her father from her dorm room on April 22, 1987, seeking the truth. Jennifer's questions forced Richard to confront the inevitable. The lie that had been intended to protect his children was no longer sustainable. Over the phone, he disclosed the reality. Their mother had not been undergoing cancer treatment. She had been arrested for espionage and sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. The revelation stunned Jennifer. Silence followed for several minutes before she whispered that she needed time to process the information. Michael, by then 17 and a high school senior, reacted with cold fury. He demanded details, dates, and documentation. He wanted to understand exactly what Margaret had done, why their father had lied, and whether any other people had been involved in maintaining the deception. The confrontation was intense, emotional, and revealing. Michael's questions reflected not only the betrayal of trust by his mother, but also the disorientation caused by the lies of the parent he had relied upon to guide him through the world. Sarah, the youngest at 14, experienced the revelation differently. She cried quietly for 2 hours, mourning the mother she believed she had known and beginning to comprehend the distance created by her father's protective deception. She withdrew emotionally, limiting communication with Richard to only the necessary interactions for daily life. In 1988, the Coleman children began therapy with Dr. Patricia Morrison, a family therapist who would later describe their case as a textbook example of trust dissolution. Jennifer maintained emotional distance during college holidays. Michael refrained from speaking to his father for nearly a year, and Sarah developed complex grief symptoms, mourning not only the mother she had lost, but also the father she felt she had never truly known. The therapy sessions revealed the double-edged nature of Richard's decision. The lie intended to protect them had also inflicted deep, long-lasting harm. The doctor documented the profound emotional consequences of sustained deception. The children's formative years had been shaped by a false narrative, leaving them struggling with trust, identity, and their perception of reality. Each sibling responded differently, reflecting the individuality of their coping mechanisms. The sessions illuminated how even well-intentioned lies could ripple across years, generating emotional trauma far more complicated than the consequences of the original espionage. In June 1995, Jennifer, Michael, and Sarah drove to a federal correctional facility to visit Margaret Coleman for the first time in 14 years. Margaret, then 62 years old, had spent over a decade in prison, separated from the life she once knew. The 4-hour visit, the maximum allowed for family interactions, became a pivotal moment for the family. Although limited in scope, it allowed the children to hear from their mother directly, understand her perspective, and begin to rebuild some measure of connection. Margaret described how she had been recruited by Elena Rostover, a Soviet intelligence officer posing as a piano teacher. She explained how the recruitment had progressed gradually, starting with innocuous tasks that escalated into high-stakes espionage, and how she had been coerced with threats to her family. The children began to comprehend the manipulations, the fear, and the coercion that had dictated their mother's actions for years. Subsequent visits became routine, though conducted under strict federal guidelines. Michael, now an engineer living in North Carolina, Jennifer, working in public policy in Washington, D.C., and Sarah, pursuing graduate studies in psychology in Virginia. Each navigated the complicated emotional terrain of reconnecting with a mother who had been physically absent yet emotionally present in memory, letters, and carefully maintained illusions. Throughout this period, Richard Coleman never visited Margaret in prison. He maintained a strict emotional distance, believing that his duty had been to raise and protect the children. Margaret wrote occasional letters expressing gratitude and reflections on her choices. Richard preserved them but never responded, telling himself he was safeguarding his children from further emotional entanglement. He remained steadfast in his belief that he had acted appropriately, even as he acknowledged the unintended harm the lies had caused. The story of the Coleman family is not a simple tale of right and wrong. It is a narrative of impossible choices, ethical dilemmas, and the collision between love, duty, and fear. Richard's decision to report his wife while shielding his children exemplifies the tension between civic responsibility and parental protection. Margaret's choices, initially framed as voluntary, were heavily influenced by coercion and fear, illustrating how manipulation can intertwine with ordinary life to produce extraordinary consequences. On November 8, 2006, after serving 22 years of her 25-year sentence, Margaret Coleman was released from federal prison. Her sentence had been reduced for good behavior and cooperation with counterintelligence debriefings. At 63 years old, she was leaving prison having lost nearly a quarter of a century to her choices and the consequences of espionage. She moved into a small apartment in Atlanta and found work as a clerk in a music store. The transition from confinement to freedom was daunting, a world reshaped by decades of absence and a society that had continued without her. Margaret approached her new life cautiously. Every decision, from commuting to work to interacting with neighbors, was layered with awareness of the past. She had to navigate public exposure, potential judgment, and the emotional complexity of reconnecting with her children and the family she had left behind. Jennifer, Michael, and Sarah began visiting Margaret regularly, now adults with their own lives and responsibilities. Michael drove up from North Carolina, Jennifer came from Washington, D.C., and Sarah visited during breaks from graduate school. Their visits were conducted under federal regulations, often in 30-minute increments. Yet they allowed the family to slowly rebuild a relationship. The children confronted the intricate mixture of emotions resulting from decades of deception, separation, and betrayal. They sought answers, not only about Margaret's espionage, but also about the decisions their father had made to protect them. Over time, through conversation and reflection, they began to understand the complex motivations behind both parents' actions. Margaret shared what she could about her recruitment, the coercion she had faced, and the fear that had dictated her choices. Each visit, letter, and conversation became a building block in reconstructing trust, though the emotional scars remained. Richard Coleman passed away on June 15, 2010, at the age of 73. He suffered a heart attack while working in his garden, leaving behind the tangible and intangible legacies of his life. When the children sorted through his belongings, they discovered a locked drawer in his study containing approximately 200 letters from Margaret. These letters had been carefully preserved, never shared with the children until after his death. They chronicled updates on her life, reflections on her choices, remorse, and questions about the children's lives. The discovery of these letters revealed the depth of Richard's commitment to protecting his children and maintaining the narrative he had constructed for their well-being. Yet, it also highlighted the complexity of human decision-making, where acts intended to preserve life and innocence could simultaneously inflict emotional harm. The Coleman family's story demonstrates how a single discovery, a hidden metal box, photographs of classified documents, coded letters, can cascade into decades of consequences. Richard's actions, driven by duty and paternal protection, intertwined with Margaret's coerced participation in espionage to produce a narrative that was simultaneously one of integrity and betrayal. Each choice carried weight, ethical ambiguity, and consequences that reverberated through the lives of their children, shaping their understanding of trust, loyalty, and family. The children, though hurt and bewildered, gradually found a way to navigate the complex emotional landscape their parents had created. They confronted questions about morality, choice, and consequence, learning that even in extraordinary circumstances, people often act out of love, fear, or the need to protect those they care for. The saga of the Colemans is a story of impossible decisions, of human resilience, and the delicate balance between duty and love. It reminds us that life rarely presents choices in clear terms of right or wrong. Actions taken to protect can simultaneously wound. Lies, even those told for protective reasons, carry consequences that may unfold years later. The story emphasizes the importance of transparency, communication, and the recognition that human decisions are often a complex mix of ethical reasoning, emotion, and circumstance. The Colemans' journey also underscores the unpredictable consequences of espionage, the far-reaching impact of secrets, and the enduring power of human connection to heal even the deepest of wounds. Their story, rooted in Cold War history, transcends its time, offering insights into the moral complexities faced by individuals when personal loyalty collides with national duty. Richard and Margaret Coleman's story is not one easily categorized. It is simultaneously a tale of devotion, betrayal, fear, and resilience. It is a narrative that spans decades, touches on history, espionage, and family dynamics, and ultimately illuminates the human capacity for both error and redemption. It challenges us to consider what we would do when faced with impossible choices, when loyalty, duty, and love pull us in conflicting directions, and when the lives of those we care for hang in the balance. The Coleman's experience teaches that, even in the most extraordinary circumstances, the decisions we make echo far beyond the moment, shaping lives, relationships, and legacies in ways we cannot always foresee. It is a story of truth, lies, consequences, and the enduring strength of family, offering lessons that resonate well beyond the Cold War era. If you found this story compelling and thought-provoking, make sure to subscribe to our channel for more incredible real-life stories that explore the depths of human decision-making, espionage, and the extraordinary choices people make when faced with impossible situations. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an update, and share your thoughts in the comments about what you would do if placed in a situation like the Colemans.